Questions that were never meant to understand you. There are questions that the moment you answer honestly, you are no longer simply opening up. You are revealing the exact place where you can be controlled. And the most dangerous part is this: those questions rarely sound dangerous. They sound warm, thoughtful, almost like being understood. For example, someone looks at you calmly and asks, "What could completely break you?" It sounds deep. It sounds like they are trying to enter your inner world. But in the wrong hands, at the wrong time, your answer is no longer a confession. It becomes data. You tell them who you are most afraid to lose, which wound once brought you to your knees. What, if touched in the right way, could make you lose control? You think you are building intimacy, when in reality, you may have just handed someone a map of your weaknesses. And most people never realize it. A person who wants to control you does not need to understand your whole life. They only need to know what makes you panic, who makes you soften, and what you are so afraid of losing that you would betray your own boundaries to keep it. That is the frightening part. They rarely ask like a predator. They ask with sincerity, with focused eyes, with the feeling that, finally, someone truly understands you. And that is why so many people unlock the most private parts of themselves without realizing what just happened. In this video, I will show you the kinds of questions that do exactly that. Questions that do not just extract information, but quietly make you expose your own strategic weaknesses. And the final one is the question countless people answer almost instantly, simply because they mistake it for understanding. When a deep question becomes a warning sign. But one thing needs to be clear. Not everyone who asks about your private life is trying to manipulate you. Not everyone who wants to understand your fears, your pressure, or your past is toxic. Some questions come from genuine care, from someone who has stayed long enough, from a relationship proven by time, by actions, and by respect. The problem was never the question itself. The problem is the timing, the context, and what your answer gives to the person asking. Those are the three things you need to see. First, are they asking too soon? Someone who is not close enough. Someone who has never protected you. Someone with no real history of being trustworthy, yet they already want to know what scares you, who you are missing, or how heavy your pressure has become. That is no longer ordinary curiosity. They are entering your private world faster than trust should ever be allowed to form. Do not rush to call that intimacy. Sometimes it is just someone testing which doors inside you are still unlocked. Second, what is the context? Some questions only appear when you are at your weakest, after a failure, after a breakup, in the middle of confusion, or the moment you enter a negotiation where the other side already holds the advantage. If, at that exact moment, someone starts digging into your fear, your loneliness, or how desperate you really are, do not just listen to the question. Look at this instead. Who gains power once you answer? Third, what does your answer give them? If you reveal the thing that makes you most vulnerable, what does the other person actually receive? Understanding, or another piece of the map, showing them where to apply pressure, how to measure your weakness, and exactly what to touch. When they want to make you waver, this is the line a clear-minded person must learn to see. Real care leaves you feeling safer after the conversation. Subtle extraction feels different. It leaves you with the sense that you said too much, but you cannot name what you just lost. One is connection, the other is collection, and if you cannot tell the difference, you will start mistaking interrogation for the feeling of being understood. That is why, before we break down each dangerous type of question, We need to agree on one principle. Not every deep question deserves a deep answer, and to understand why that matters, we need to look at a belief far too many people have placed in exactly the wrong place. Being too honest can make you weaker. Many people are taught this. The more honest you are, the more mature you are. The more you open up, the more authentic you become. The less you hide, the more trustworthy you seem. It sounds beautiful, but when you apply that rule to everyone, it is no longer maturity. It is naivety, disguised as virtue. The problem was never that you have weaknesses. Everyone does. The problem is this: you are handing over the map of those weaknesses to someone who has never proven they deserve to hold it. When someone knows what you are afraid to lose, they know what can make you panic. When they know how isolated you feel, they know how few exits you believe you have. When they know how badly you need an opportunity, they know whether you will dare to walk away from the table. That is no longer sharing. That is information imbalance. And in any interaction, the person who understands your weak points better than you realize holds more leverage than you think. Do not misunderstand this. I am not saying you should shut yourself off. I am not saying you should become cold and treat every question like an attack. I am saying this: honesty does not mean that every time someone asks, you owe them the deepest parts of yourself. Some things should only be spoken after the other person has proven one thing, that they will not turn your vulnerability into their advantage. Not after a few well-placed questions, not after one perfectly timed moment of sympathy, and certainly not just because they made you feel seen. Many people are not exploited because they are foolish. They are exploited because they are desperate to be understood. And a clever manipulator only needs to appear at exactly that moment, ask the right few questions, then let you finish the work for them. Remember this: not everything private needs to be answered immediately. Sometimes a single pause is enough to keep your composure, your choices, and your position inside the conversation. Because from here on, we step into the first kind of question, the kind that does not just want to know what you think, but what could make you collapse the fastest. Question 1. What could break you? The first kind of question rarely sounds like a trap. It sounds like an invitation to open up. Someone looks at you closely and asks, what are you most afraid of losing right now? Or, even deeper, if one thing could completely break you, what would it be? It sounds sincere. It sounds like they want to understand the most fragile part of you. But in the wrong context, that is no longer care. It is a way to identify where you are easiest to destabilize. What they really want to know is, what makes you panic? Who softens you the fastest? And what, if touched in exactly the right place, will make you react before you have time to think? In controlling relationships, pressure rarely comes first. Observation comes first. Questions come first. Memory comes first, because they understand. A very simple rule: if you want to push someone into surrender, find out what they cannot bear to lose. It could be a job, a relationship, a reputation, the need to be respected, or the fear of being left behind. And the moment you say it out loud, it is no longer just a fear inside your head. It becomes potential leverage. Look at the workplace. Someone who does not truly know you yet asks very gently, what is your biggest goal here? What scares you most if you fail? In genuine mentorship, those questions may be harmless. But if they come from someone trying to measure how dependent you are on this position, then your answer starts becoming useful. Now they know You are afraid of being underestimated, afraid of losing your chance to move up, afraid of being seen as not capable enough. And from that point on, the rhythm changes. Work outside your role becomes a chance to prove yourself. A late shift becomes a sign of commitment. An unreasonable demand becomes a test of how serious you really are. Not because they hold total control, but because you let them see the emotional cost of saying no. Romance works the same way. Someone who has not been in your life for very long already asks, what hurt you the most in the past? What do you fear most in love? Maybe they truly want to understand you, but maybe they are checking which parts of you shake the easiest. If you have been betrayed before, they know ambiguity will make you anxious. If you have been abandoned before, they know prolonged silence will make you spiral. If you have always craved the feeling of being chosen, they know exactly when to give you warmth and exactly when to pull it away, so you start chasing it. That is when an old wound gets pulled into a new power dynamic. The danger of this question is not in how it sounds. It is in the feeling that you are finally being understood. Right before, you become easier to read than ever before. So, when someone starts probing this way, do not rush to hand them the deepest part of you. You can simply say, I'm more focused on how I handle difficulty than on dissecting my fears. Short, calm, not defensive, and it gives away nothing extra. If they keep pushing, be clearer. That is personal information I do not share in this context. Short, clean, no apology. A decent person will understand. Someone with an agenda will usually become irritated, and sometimes that reaction gives you a clearer answer than any explanation ever could. Remember this: a dangerous person does not need to know where you are strong. They only need to know where you break. But knowing where you break is still not enough. If they truly want to push you into weakness, they also need to know when pressure arrives, is there anyone standing behind you to keep you from falling? Question 2. When pressure hits, who is really behind you? Knowing what can shake you is still not enough. If someone wants to push you into a weaker position, they need to know one more thing. When pressure arrives, is there anyone close enough to pull you back into reality? That is why the second kind of question often sounds deeply concerned. In moments like this, do you still have anyone truly on your side? Or do you usually carry everything by yourself? It sounds like worry, like they are afraid you have been holding too much alone. But in the wrong context, that is no longer comfort. It is a way to test whether you are isolated enough to be influenced. A person standing alone does not just lack emotional support. They lack something far more dangerous: an outside layer of reality checking. No one to ask. No one clear-headed enough to say, wait, something about this is off. No one to help separate emotion from decision, and in controlling dynamics. That information is extremely valuable. The less outside resistance a person has, the easier it becomes to pull them into a reality someone else has built for them. They do not need to pressure you immediately. They only need to make you believe you should trust them more than you trust your own hesitation. Look at a very common situation. Someone presents you with an opportunity, an investment, a rushed project, a deal, framed as if, wait one more day, and your future disappears. Then they ask, for decisions like this, Can you make the call yourself? Or do you usually need to ask other people first? It sounds like they are asking about your decision-making style, but what they really want to know is there anyone behind you? Close enough to break their urgency? If you say, I decide everything on my own, they understand. No one is likely to step in and slow you down. If you say, I do not really talk to anyone about these things, they understand that if they control this conversation well enough, they may control the decision that comes after it too. And from there, the rhythm changes. Your time to think gets shorter. The pressure to commit gets heavier. Asking for outside input starts being framed as a lack of confidence, not because you actually lack confidence, but because they are trying to remove from the room every voice that does not serve their interest. In personal relationships, the same mechanism becomes even quieter. A toxic person may say, besides me, who else could you even tell this to? It sounds intimate, but in reality, it is a way to box the relationship in. Little by little, they make you feel like you have only one place left to return to. And once you start believing that everything they say lands with more weight than it should, they hurt you, and you defend them for it. They pull you away from other relationships, and you call it finally being understood. Not every form of isolation begins with direct control. Sometimes it begins when someone makes you lose trust in every other voice around you. Then, slowly, they become the only mirror you use to understand yourself. That is the real danger behind this question. It does not only want to know whether you are lonely, it wants to know this: if they begin influencing you, is there anyone close enough to pull you back out? So, when someone becomes too curious about your private support system, do not rush to prove you are alone or prove you are surrounded. You can simply say, I always have the right people when I need them. Short, calm, and it reveals nothing extra. If they keep digging, close the door more clearly. My personal support system is not part of this conversation. No attack, no defensiveness, just a clean boundary. Someone who truly respects you will understand. Someone measuring how easy you are to influence will usually lose their rhythm. And that reaction is worth watching more than any explanation. Remember this: telling someone you are completely alone is not always honesty. Sometimes it is just a quiet way of telling them no one will hold you steady. When the pressure starts tightening, and if you have answered this kind of question too easily before, that does not mean you are weak. It only means there was a time when you mistook strategic curiosity for genuine care. Before we go further, look closely at how the first two questions connect. Look closely at this. They sound different. One question wants to know, what could make you collapse? The other wants to know, when that happens, is there anyone close enough behind you to hold you steady? But place them side by side, and you will see they are doing the same job. The first question identifies which part of you is easiest to trigger. The second identifies what happens after that part gets touched. One reveals where you are easiest to shake. The other reveals how much clarity you still have left. Once the pressure begins to tighten, and countless people answer both, simply because they think they are being honest. No, in the wrong context. That is no longer honesty. It is handing over the exact information that should have been protected most carefully. You do not need to live like a fortress, but you also do not need to open every locked door inside yourself. Just because someone knows how to knock in the right rhythm. Some people ask because they genuinely care. Others ask because they are measuring how easily you can be influenced, and you are under no obligation to satisfy another person's curiosity. If, by this point, you realize you have spoken too much before, simply because you did not want to seem distant, comment, "My weaknesses are not free," not to sound cold, but to remind yourself, privacy is part of power. And from here, we move into the third kind of question, the kind that does not need to know what you fear. It does not even need to know whether anyone stands behind you. It only needs to know one thing. How badly do you need this outcome, so you will not dare to walk away from the table? Question 3. How badly do you need this outcome? Some people do not need to know what you are afraid to lose. They do not need to know whether anyone stands behind you. They only need to determine one thing. How badly do you need this outcome, so you will not dare to walk away from the table? That is why this kind of question usually appears in very practical moments. Be honest, you really need this job right now, don't you? Or, if this deal falls through, would that hit you hard? It sounds like they are simply trying to understand your situation, but in the wrong context. It is a way to measure how difficult it would be for you to leave this opportunity behind. And the moment they know you need it badly, your value in their eyes starts being recalculated, not based on your ability, not based on your actual worth, but based on one question: does this person still have a way out? In every negotiation, power does not only come from what you bring, it comes from whether you can stand up and leave the table when the terms are no longer worth accepting. If the other side senses that you have very few options left, they start pushing the line, softly at first, then further. Look at a job interview. A candidate has a gap on their resume. They need to get back into the workforce. The recruiter notices it, then asks, very casually, "Are you under financial pressure right now? You are hoping to start work soon, correct?" If the purpose is to offer the right kind of support, those questions may be harmless. But if they are being used to see whether you would accept almost any offer just to get a contract signed, then this is no longer a balanced conversation. It is a pressure test behind your decision. If you answer too honestly that you need money, that you cannot wait much longer, that you just need a job as soon as possible, then immediately the other person understands you entered this conversation with less leverage than they did. And from there, everything begins to shift. The salary drops a little, the benefits thin out a little, the workload grows a little heavier, and all of it rests on one assumption: you will not walk away easily. The same thing happens with freelancers. A client studies your portfolio, realizes you need a strong project to build your reputation. Then they ask, "This case study would be huge for you, right? It would strengthen your profile a lot, wouldn't it?" It sounds like recognition, but sometimes it is only the opening move before an unfair proposal. More work, more revisions, faster deadlines, lower pay. Not because the work is worth less, but because they believe your need to be chosen has become greater. This is what many people miss. When you reveal that you need this opportunity too much, the other side does not only hear desire, they hear the price you may be willing to pay through concession. Some people pay with money, some with time, some with boundaries, and some with their professional dignity. All of it begins in a moment that seems harmless, when you are too honest about having few options left. So, when someone tries to measure how badly you need this result, do not rush to place your urgency on the table. You can simply say, I evaluate opportunities based on their actual value, not on personal pressure. Short, calm, and it gives them no extra leverage. If they keep pressing, hold your position more clearly. If the terms are not right, I always have other options. Let's stay focused on the agreement. This is not pretending. This is how you keep the exchange at the level of value, instead of letting it become a game of who needs whom more. A professional person will return to the terms. Someone hoping to exploit your lack of alternatives will often start losing interest. And that reaction is data too. Remember this: at the negotiation table, desperation does not need to be spoken aloud. It only needs to be sensed. But there is another kind of question, more intimate than money or opportunity. It does not measure what you need. It measures where you believe you are lacking. Question 4. Where are you most insecure? This is the kind of question many people answer the fastest. Not because it is easy, but because it creates the feeling that, finally, someone truly sees them. Someone asks, what do people misunderstand about you the most? Or, more directly, is there something about yourself you still haven't been able to move past? It sounds deep, personal, almost like an invitation to finally be understood, but in the wrong context. That is no longer an honest conversation. It is a way to identify where your ego is easiest to wound. Not everyone who asks about your insecurities wants to hurt you, but some people are not asking to listen. They are asking to remember. They want to know what makes you feel inferior, which part of you reacts too strongly, and what sentence, said at the right moment, will make you immediately want to explain, defend yourself, or prove your worth. Because once someone knows where you feel lacking, they do not need to attack your whole identity. They only need to touch one point, and the rest you will do to yourself. Look at a very familiar situation. Someone close enough that you lower your guard asks during a private conversation, what are you most insecure about? You talk about your appearance, about feeling uncomfortable in front of a crowd, about always fearing judgment. At the time, they listen carefully. Maybe they even seem compassionate, but a few weeks later, in front of other people, they make a joke. Don't tease them about how they dress. They're sensitive about that. Everyone laughs. They laugh too, and you stand there, not knowing how to respond. If you speak up, you look oversensitive. If you stay silent, you understand exactly what happened. Something once shared in trust has just been turned into a tool to diminish you in public. That is the danger behind this kind of question. It creates intimacy in the present, in exchange for a very precise form of leverage later. On social media, the same mechanism shows up differently. You express an opinion someone does not challenge. The point itself, they go straight for your reaction. Why are you reacting so strongly? Did that hit an insecurity? Or that defensive? Must be a confidence issue. The goal is not debate. The goal is to pull you away from the original subject and push you into proving that you are not weak, you are not insecure, you are not affected. But the moment You rush in to prove it. You have stepped inside the frame they built for you. They do not need to be right about you. They only need to make you behave as if their words carry weight. And when you begin defending your ego in front of someone who never earned an explanation, your position has already started to shift. Here is what many people miss. Insecurity does not only hurt you if exposed to the wrong person. It tells them exactly what kind of pressure can make you lose your composure the fastest. So when someone tries to pull you into dissecting the most fragile parts of yourself, do not cooperate just because the question sounds profound. You can simply say, I know myself very well. I just do not turn that into material for someone else's curiosity. Short, calm, and clear enough to close the door. If they keep pressing, ask them back. How does that help this conversation? That is an important question because it moves the attention away from your weakness and shines it back onto their motive. Someone who truly respects you will stop someone collecting. The cracks in your armor will usually start to stumble because they are used to people opening up on reflex. They are not used to their own motive being examined in return. Remember this: no one is entitled to know where you are cracked just because they ask in a gentle voice. And by now, the first 4 kinds of questions should be clear. 1. Searches for where you break. 1. Measures whether anyone stands behind you. 1. Checks whether you still have a way out. And 1 finds the fracture inside your ego on the surface. They look very different, but underneath, they are all serving the same purpose. 4 questions, 1 purpose. That purpose is leverage, not to understand you more deeply, not to make the conversation more honest, but to identify where you are easiest to influence. Taken one by one, those 4 questions seem almost unrelated. 1 asks about fear, 1 asks about support, 1 asks how badly you need something, and 1 asks where your ego is most fragile. But placed side by side, they form a complete map. The first reveals what could make you lose control. The second reveals whether anyone is close enough to pull you back. The third reveals whether you still have enough options to walk away. And the last reveals this: where to touch, so your ego reacts for them. That is the full map, your breaking point, your support system, your exit route, and the cracks inside your sense of self. If someone knows all 4, they do not need to control you through force. They only need to apply the right pressure at the right moment, in the right place, and the rest many people will do for them. They explain themselves. They try to prove their worth. They give in. They stay inside a game they should have left a long time ago. That is why not every deep conversation is connection. Some conversations look like closeness, while quietly measuring how controllable you really are. You do not need to become paranoid, but you do need a pause. Before answering a private question, ask yourself, why is this being asked now? Has this person truly earned the right to know? And if I answer honestly, how could that information be used? A few seconds of checking can prevent countless moments where you open the wrong door to the wrong person far too early. Not every question deserves a full answer, and not every silence is a lack of goodwill. Sometimes silence is simply how you keep The control, that was always yours. And here is the core of it. Maturity is not being ready to reveal everything. Maturity is knowing what should be shared, with whom, and when. And that is where the most important point needs to be made. Privacy is position. By now, the most important lesson is not to start suspecting everyone. It is to stop betraying yourself just to make a conversation feel more comfortable. You do not need to become cold. You do not need to shut down. You do not need to enter every relationship with extreme defensiveness. But there is one thing you must understand. Access to you does not automatically belong to someone just because they asked. Some people do deserve to hear the truest parts of you, but they earn that right. Not because they ask well. They earn it because, over time, they have proven this. They do not turn your vulnerability into an advantage for themselves. That is the difference. You can still be honest without being unconditional. You can still be open without being careless. You can still be deep without turning yourself into an open file. For anyone who knows how to listen in the right tone. Many people lose their position, not because they are weak, but because they give away too early the information that should have been released very slowly. They share when sharing was not necessary. They explain when no explanation was owed. They try to prove themselves inside conversations where no one present had actually earned the right to demand it. And then one day, they are shocked to discover the very things once spoken in trust have returned as pressure, judgment, or control. Do not let that repeat. From now on, when a question goes too deep, remember, you always have the right to pause, the right to smile without answering, the right to keep a part of yourself for yourself, the right to let people prove they are safe enough before they reach the most honest parts of you. That is not coldness. That is self-respect with structure. It is understanding that privacy does not make you distant. It only makes it impossible for others to enter you casually. And this is the final thing I want you to carry after this video. Maturity is not answering every question with absolute truth. Maturity is knowing which questions do not deserve the truest part of you. And if, starting today, you stop handing over the most important parts of yourself just to keep others comfortable, comment, "My weaknesses are not free." That is not just a comment. It is a reminder. From this point forward, the right to decide what gets known about you returns to where it always belonged.